Right, I'm starting the recording now, mate. So, good morning. This is the class for the 11th of February, which did not record to Echo 360. Maybe I pressed the wrong button. Who knows? But anyway, I'm recording it now for you. So, here's the QR code, but I'm not sure where you have to do it now or not, the QR code, but let's move on. So what we're looking at today is, why do I take photos? And that could be a question that many people could ask themselves. I ask myself quite a lot, why do I take photos? Not because I'm no good at it. I think I'm exceptionally good at it. But, you still have to ask yourself, why are you taking this photo? Why are you doing it? What's the purpose of it? And that's what we're going to go through today, is why do we take photos? And we're also going to be looking at some photos that I've done or still doing for a project that I'm working on. So that's the documentary project, and that was leading up to the field exercise that we're going to be doing later on during the class time. So why do I take pictures? Well, it's a top-heavy question, really, and I ask myself that question quite a lot. And it's definitely more than just one answer to that question. There's several answers, really, as to why you go out and take pictures, and we'll go through those in a second. But before I answer that question, I'm going to give you a short background as to how me and my photography came together, because it's always interesting to find out why people started doing photography and what was their reason for doing photography. So this was this particular model, the Nikon F2, was the camera that I first started using. Not this particular one, but that went by a long time ago. But yeah, the Nikon F2. And you can still get the F2. It's still a really good film camera. But this is the one that I first started using. And how this came about, really, was... going the wrong way. Was because I'm dyslexic. I'm proud to be dyslexic. I have severe problems sometimes. And photography was the only way that I could really sort of like get what I wanted to say across to the outside world, really. I didn't learn to read properly until I think it was when I started going, just before I started going to my secondary school. So I was around about 10, 11 before I started actually forming words and putting them together. Before that, if we had to read in class, I used to look at the pictures and make the story up as I went along. But I think that the teachers knew, but they just put it down to being sort of like I was either stupid or I was lazy or one of those things. But that's not the case. But I'll... yeah, so that's what I did. It was when I went to my secondary school that I got involved in photography. It was when you started to choose the classes that you wanted to do. Really, I wanted to do art and technical drawing, but I wasn't allowed to do both of them. So the teacher said, "Oh, do physics. You like taking things apart." And I went to the physics class obviously with the whole class, but with my two mates, Keith and Paul, and we were just mess-arsing around in the class and stuff like that. And to cut the short story short, the teacher gave us a camera and told us to go away, get out of his class and stop messing around. And Keith and Paul both disappeared and left me with the camera. And I just didn't have a clue what I was doing with the camera. Just pressing the shutter button and opening, everything was happening with it. But I came to find out it didn't really happen until weeks later. But I took the camera back because I didn't want the teacher thinking I was nicking the camera or something like that. And he told me to come back the next day and he'd show me how to develop the film. And it was from then onwards that I started doing photography. I didn't go to many classes, as such. I went to the classes I needed to go to, but most of the time whilst I was at the school for the last 2 years or so, I was spending the majority of it just doing photography, taking pictures, going into the darkroom, developing them, processing, and all the rest of it. So, yeah, the education I came out with wasn't very good, but I don't recommend that you do that. I think you should, everyone should go to classes and behave themselves. But anyway, yeah, so that for me, I think there's 4 possible answers to why do we do photography. And I'll go through these answers now. Okay, so the picture that you're seeing on the screen at the moment, this is a gentleman called Dave. He's father-in-law of my eldest daughter, Courtney, and Dave suffers from Alzheimer's and dementia, and he's lost a lot of his friends. And I go and see him on regular basis, and I sit and I talk to him, and he still remembers a lot, but forgets a lot as well and stuff like that. But I was around his house one day and he was just sitting at the dining table, and I saw him through the mirror, and I just took the picture. It made me feel something at the time. I could see a vulnerability in Dave at that moment, something I've not seen before because he's from Newcastle. He's a very jokative lad, and he's always got something to say for himself and so on. But I just saw a bit of vulnerability just at this moment, and that's why I took the picture. I like the composition of the picture. I like the framing with the shapes around him, but I particularly like in the mirror where you can actually see almost 2 of Dave. So if you look just above the clock, you'll see a secondary image of Dave in the mirror, and it kind of like shows the 2 personalities that I think are there in most of the time in Dave. The happy, jovial bloke who likes a good laugh, and the moments when dementia really strikes him. So we take pictures because we want to feel something that we want others to feel, and so on. So that's one reason. This one, like the memories, capturing of the mundane things, holidays and special events and so on. And on the bridge here is my dog Stanman. He's getting old and smelly now, but he's still my dog and I love him to bits. But when he was a bit younger, we used to go along this track and he'd run off up in front of me like he normally does. And then when I came to go up the bridge, he was just standing at the bridge waiting for me as if I was the old person who couldn't keep up with him. And I just took the picture of him, and he just seemed to be a bit, why on earth did you do that kind of thing? So we take pictures for memories. So we take pictures for feelings and take pictures for memories. And also for learning. I love to still learn about photography, and I'm still a lot that I need to learn within the photography. That's why I like working with students. I love working with students because sometimes they take pictures and you think to yourself, how on earth did you take that? Why did you take that? And you get feedback from the students, as to why they done a particular picture and how they done a particular picture. And, it opens the doors again for you, makes you think about your own photography and starts, bringing thoughts into photography that, that maybe you didn't think about that, or you've forgotten about that, or you hadn't done that for some time. So it's the learning still within photography that I really do love. And then you know, to create a story. Me and Steve spent some time in Berwick, which is just below Scotland, a nice place, and it's got the I've forgotten the name of the Holy Islands, Farne Islands, and stuff. Lindisfarne, that's it. That's what I was trying to get to. Lindisfarne. And this was where this particular picture was taken. Was coming off there, and it's a piece of land which it gets cut off for certain parts of the day. So if you get stuck on it, you're stuck on it for some time. But I was messing around with a 15mm lens that I'd borrowed off of my mate, and I was taking pictures in the wing mirror and trying to include like the landscape within the picture. And I wasn't really aware of the lady on the bike, but I was afterwards, and she had her husband with her. I presume it was her husband. And as I went past her and I fired off a shot, which I was trying to do the landscape in sort of like movement and stuff like that, get some movement into the landscape. I remember saying, "Did he take our picture? Chase after him," or some words to those effects. So I had to tell Steve to put his foot down and drive away quite quickly. But you know, so we take pictures to create stories, for memories, for learning, and feelings is the four elements that I often look at when I'm taking my pictures. So this was the the first camera that I owned, or a similar model to it, not maybe this particular one was in the picture, but my uncle bought me this camera, and he bought it basically to try and wind my dad up, and it was a very expensive camera. You know, it was over £100 when back in the 70s when I was doing photography. But he was always encouraging me to do my photography. He was really good, my uncle was, in terms of the photography, whereas my dad, he wanted me to get a proper job, a man's job. He wanted me to be a carpenter. And I asked my dad about, you know, being a photographer. Then he was none too keen on me being a photographer. He wanted me to be like, you know, a carpenter and stuff like that. But yeah, my uncle, he supported me through my photography and got me my first camera, which I was forever grateful for, really. So this is where, once I had sort of like learned to do my photography, this was the place where I really liked going and doing the photography. It was a place called Butlins. We used to go to Butlins, not maybe every year, but almost every other year. And it was a place where parents could take their killed children and get them sort of like locked up for a week whilst they went off and, you know, drunk and got married and had merry times and stuff like that. Because, you know, back in the 70s, you know, people were very, very hard working. Not that they're not hard working now, but, you know, you worked very hard and you went off and you had your summer holiday, and it was usually to places like Butlins where, you know, everything was catered for you. You had accommodation for the week, and you had food for the week, and you could get rid of the kids from under your feet for the rest of the week and stuff like that. So this is where I really started putting my documentary work together, was at places like Butlins, because I could wander around with my camera and just take pictures, and nobody sort of like questioned it or interfered with it, because there was hundreds of holiday makers, if not thousands of holiday makers there, and everyone had a camera, so you didn't stand out like a sore thumb like if you was somewhere else. So Butlins was like that, the starting point for it. And these are kind of like the three memories of most Butlins holidays. It was always raining when you went on holiday during the summer. Your parents turned up in their best clothes and you turned up in whatever fitted you, I suppose, at the end of the day. And things like old drunk men rolling their trouser legs up and knobbly knee competitions and stuff like that. I suppose this was before the internet age, well before the internet age, so we had to get our entertainment somehow. And so things like that were all over sort of like your Butlins holiday camps and stuff like that. But this is a documentary work, and it's not really what you first notice in the picture, which is what kind of like what I like. It's the secondary kind of noticing what is in the picture. Sometimes it's what's going on behind the main subject, which is the real interesting story within the picture, especially when you're doing sort of like documentary work and you're using images to tell stories. Now, back in the 70s and the 80s in places like Butlins and stuff like that, this is the commonplace where one of the things, so old men done the knobbly knee competition, you had your glamorous granny, and then you'd tug of wars and stuff like that. So you had masculine things and things of beauty and so on. But you always had your beauty competition. Now, whether you agree with it or condone it or whatever, it's a thing of past. It's a thing of our history. Okay. And fortunately, things have moved on from these times, and there's a lot more respect for everybody now than there was in previous times. So you might condone this picture of the beauty queens. I think this must have been sort of like the finalists within the beauty queen pageant, or whatever you want to call it. But what for me is the most interesting part about the story is the men behind the beautiful girls and the way that they're looking at them, stuff like that. This is a thing that used to happen back in the day. It shouldn't happen, but it did happen. But it's an historical picture. That's the way that I look at these pictures. They're pictures of historical value. So, they still do have a meaning. Now, there's the one which is on the top right of the picture, which is the cleaners working at Butlins. And they've all become very excited about something, and they're doing, a little jig or dance, or they're overexcited about something. But it's the little child wearing the Spider-Man face mask, which is kind of like almost replicating the movements that they're doing as well, which I find quite interesting. And it's also it's a historical kind of picture. Well, it is a historical picture where what was the fashion of the day at the time. How did people sort of like dress back in the 70s and so on? So it's quite interesting, with the socks and stuff like that, and interesting parts to the pictures. But it's certainly the boy wearing, or the child wearing the Spider-Man mask, which tells the story for me. And then we've got the lower right picture. And within this picture, it's not the kids playing with it on the moon balls, which we used to call them, big orange things that you would bounce on for hours on end and try and stay on. Those were, our toys. We didn't have PS5s back in them days. We had rubber balls that we bounced on. Was the thing that we used to do in our day. But it's like what you see within the actual picture and the story that's being told. So you have the children playing on the moon balls, which leads to the person who's got the cone on their head, and the colours all tie up. But then also what's also interesting within this picture is the sign, hair salon. So is that person having a bad hair day? So they have to cover up their head and head of hair before they go off to the hair salon. So, it's those hidden messages within images that I quite like, and which will tell the story always. So in this particular image here, you can tell that this is a picture done by a pro photographer. And the reason why you can tell that it's a picture done by a pro photographer is the colour within the image. Back in the 70s, when colour was first coming out, it was awful. If you got cheap film and you got it processed, the colours were never ever correct. But on this one here, you can see that it's it's a professional film and it's been professionally processed, and that's purely with the colours. And the colours is a big thing within these images back then. I was just getting used to film being in colour. I never used colour film as such, and I kind of like 90% of my work nowadays is still done black and white because I just like the monotone of the image. Just the pure tones and contrast within the image is what I kind of like. But there's also like things which are going on in the picture. Nowadays, parents play with their children a lot more. They engage with their children a lot more. Back then, kids were put in playgrounds and told to get on with it, whilst the parents, are having a drink up in the social club. So there's still, you can still see the children because it's on the top level of the building, behind the skyline slide. So you could still see your kids and like that playing in the playground or playing around and stuff like that. But there was very little contact, in terms of the 70s between parents. But you've got the one father who's making, some kind of effort sitting on the horse with his son, but he's sitting at the back and his son's sitting at the front. So, but for me, it's the little lad with his sunglasses and his cut shirt, t-shirt that he's wearing. He thinks he's quite a cool dude, really. So memories of the 70s and back in Butlins and stuff like that. And kids were dropped off in places where, gave the impression that they was being looked after here. Women in nurses' outfits to try and give it a little bit more credential to the places where they are, but I don't suppose these women were even qualified as nurses. They was just asked to dress up in these uniforms to make it look a little bit more, protective, I suppose, in some ways. So the story's there. You'll see the big blue object in the corner. That was called a playpen. So that was where you put the kids who you couldn't control, so they wasn't beating each other up. So it was kind of like an imprisonment going on within an area of fun. And just to end this segment here, I put in two images here. Back in those days, you could sit and have a drink and watch people swim underwater in the pool and stuff like that. I don't suppose, places would do that kind of thing now, and yes, it doesn't happen anymore. But that leads me on to a project that I've been working on for some time, the Skegness Story. So if you don't know Skegness, it's a little town which is on the east coast in Lincolnshire, and it's one of those places where if you haven't got a lot of money for a holiday, that's where you would go, or that's what most of the people see at the time. Skegness has got a real diversity of people going to it. So there's a lot of people who go there who own their own caravans and spend 9 months of the year in Skegness. So there's people, the older generation, who've got a lot of disposable income. And then there's people who haven't got a lot of income go there because it's considered to be a cheap seaside town. But I used to go to Skegness quite a bit, take my kids there and so on. But it was one day when I was walking around early in Skeggy. I was there just photographing, and one of the beaches, it had a tractor going back and forth across the beach, and it had an attachment on the back of the tractor which was combing the sand and making the sand look nice. But the only problem with that is they never went and picked the litter up from the previous day. So drink bottles and old disposed of buckets and spades and everything else which was on the beach was just getting buried on the beach. So it was becoming rubbish for future generations, I suppose, or somebody's treasure, whichever way you wanted to look at it. But, this was a blue flag beach, and all they're doing is just combing over the rubbish which was left on it. So it got me to thinking about how much damage are we actually doing to the environment and these seaside towns that we visit in one way or another. They could be very posh seaside towns, but we're still doing damage to them, and to the places like Skegness, which aren't considered to be, a glorious place to go to unless you've got very little money. But that, is another story. But let's move on. So, this is Butlins at Skegness. And once you see these white tents, because Skeggy's quite a flat, or Lincoln is quite a flat area, you can see these tents for miles. And so then you know how close you're getting to your holiday. And these are iconic statues as such within the landscape. Once you see them, it's not very far for you to go. Now, within the story that I'm doing, I said COVID has interrupted this in some ways as well. So it meant I couldn't go there as much, but now hopefully I can get to go back there a few more times and start to complete the story and work on it a little bit more. But every time I go, I try to stick to 108 images. That's all I'm going to take on each visit, so that I make sure that I'm really concentrating on the pictures that I'm taking and making sure they're the correct images, or the images that I want to tell the story. So I take the pictures, and then I go into Affinity Publisher that you might be using later on, and I lay out a contact sheet and I make notes about the pictures that I've taken. So, but if the pictures that I highlight don't necessarily mean they're going to be the pictures that are in my final selection, I might change my mind. But at this particular stage, it's usually about 4 per contact sheet that I'm picking out to narrow it down to the final selection. And when you look at these images, these are all images of things that are basically damaging the environment or being a damage to the environment in one way or another. So cheap food, cheap restaurants where litter comes out from, plastic buckets with spades, plastic buckets with what's it called? Candy floss. That's it. I was going to say cauliflower. Where did I get cauliflower from? With candy floss in it, you buy them for the kids to shut them up. Cheap fashion, which is plastics coming out from the materials, and the washing powder we're having to use to wash our clothes more frequently. The permanent holiday parks where people stay all the time, and so on. So there is this kind of damage which is going on that we don't actually see. We're paying to ignore it basically when we go on holiday. So this is one of the images that I picked out, and this particular image highlights the fact of the fast food industry which works within Skeggy. You feed people cheap, keep them happy, and all the rest of it, but we don't think about the damage that we're actually doing in terms of the rubbish which is being generated. The plastic cutlery, those trays that we have our fish and chips on that are never going to break down, and so on, and everything else. The cheap tack that we buy from the area, the flags and the buckets and everything else. It's all coming together, in this type of image. This is one of the images that I feel is starting to tell, the story that I want to tell about the damage that we're actually doing to the area and the environment. This is another one which I took on Skeggy Market. Skeggy Market is full of cheap clothing, and to a certain degree, we all buy cheap clothing. It's a disposable world that we actually live in, and fashions change ever so quickly, for the younger generation, the middle generation, and even the older generation, I suppose. But we all want the newest trends and stuff like that. So the material that goes into making the new trends, the actual cost is minimal, but the cost to the environment, when you start thinking about it, that these industries which make this clothing isn't in this country, so we import quite a lot of fashionable goods from elsewhere. So the damage done to the environment by getting this kind of fashion to the UK, the material that is used to actually make the material, it's not like your cottons and stuff like that. There's a lot of plastics now in modern fabrics and so on, and that going into the environment and never ever breaking down and ending up finally in the sea. So we buy these goods, but we don't think about the damage that we're actually doing to the environment by purchasing things like this. So this would be moving on to another contact sheet where I'm making a selection of images that I think would go into the final project. And it's kind of like this project has, excuse me, just having a sip of my tea. This project kind of has many directions to it. It's not just the environment that you could look at and the damage that we're actually doing to the environment with this thing that's going on. But if you could remove these kind of seaside towns overnight, bring in the law and say they're no longer allowed, you can't sell these materials, you can't have the fast food restaurants and so on, and we bring it back to how it used to be and stuff like that, you've also got to think about the economical damage that can be done by doing that. There's people who live in Skegness, constantly, but they only can get sort of like 9 months' work, during the peaks, during the period of holidays, and you don't actually work for the whole of the 9 months. If you're lucky, you'll get 9 months' work in this area. Most of the time, it could be sort of like 6 months or 3 months' work, and you have to try and earn as much money as possible within that time to actually, survive that time. As it's not like living in Nottingham where you go to a job Monday to Friday and you're always going to go to that job Monday to Friday. People of Skegness who actually work there and live there permanently and stuff like that, they could be looking at as an income, like I say, from 3 months, 6 months, 9 months kind of thing. So if you got rid of this environment, the damage that you would do to the economics of the area could be also quite bad, and it would then have the knock-on effect. It would, other communities rely on the people who work in this area and so on. It has a knock-on effect. So it's not just a simple answer. We need to sort of like start educating people about these kind of things, and also educating the councils about what's happening to the area and so on. So I took this picture here, and like I was talking about last week, it's the things that you don't obviously notice straight away that are also in the picture. So I took this picture so that I would have reflections coming into the image as well. So you got the rock maker, as such, the symbol of the rock maker, for the tat that's sold in the shop, but also within the actual reflection of the window, you can see the McDonald's sign, within it. You can also see a reflection of a car. So, cars travelling to the area, polluting the environment and such, and so on. So I took this picture, and I thought it's a really, really good picture to actually show all of these things in kind of like in one expressive way, about the area. So you've got the cheap tap, which is sold within these shops, and pollutants with the car and the fast food industry and all the rest of it. But when I look through the viewfinder, when I'm looking through the viewfinder, even if it's just for a few seconds, I try to really, really see what's going on within the image. But it wasn't until like months later when I was really looking at this image that I didn't actually like the composition of the dummy stuck on top of whatever it is. Because for me, it just feels like, that I'm looking at a phallic symbol within the image. And once I see that, I can no longer not see it. So I won't be using this image within my project. But then we go on to things like this, like the Cherry Tree, which is a bar diner, which was just down the road from Butlins, and it sold cheap meals there, but they were good quality meals that they would sell, for the price that you're paying. But unfortunately, it got lost in the pandemic. People couldn't eat there, obviously, so it lost its income. So that's a family business which has gone out overnight, completely just ruined. But what I really liked about when I saw this image was the shapes within the image, just the windows and the boards and the signs and everything, and then the environment fighting back against what was that a man-made construction or man-made structure. And this has only been a very short period of time, but you can see that when people aren't walking over the tarmac, nature starts to fight back, and it can break through the tarmac and break through in places where people are no longer treading it down. So in one way or another, it's bad, and in another way, it's quite good. So yeah, that's what I particularly like about this image. But then when you move on, you look at the cherry tree, and to the left of it is this piece of ground. And people are broken in, or vandals are broken into the Cherry Tree bar diner, and then they just ripped out all of the stuff which is just left there, and they've just thrown it all over the place, and they don't care about what damage is being done to the environment by throwing this stuff, and it's lying there, and it most probably lie there for some time. There's mattresses and ice cream machines, or containers, bottles, plastic, everything just dumped, and it's a real shame that people don't care about the environment as much as they should do. And this is what is important with photography, is being able to tell stories through imagery. They say every picture is worth 1,000 words. It could be worth more than that. What you can actually show through visualization rather than with the written word is far more impressive than, the written word in some cases. I took this picture because when I first saw this, these are beach huts or sea sheds or other names that they get. And these sea sheds, beach huts, they're quite expensive things to actually have. If you get one of these, you could be, £20,000 for a 6x8 shed, but people buy them, and they go and they sit in these sheds and have their cups of tea and so on and everything else. So I was really, really interested in the shape of the sheds when I took this picture. And this is also the North Sea Observatory, which is here as well. And that's where the RNLI are based, and they watch over the North Sea there and make sure that shipping is travelling past the wind farms, which are out on the North Sea coast there, so there's no damage being done. I was taking this picture and I was liking the shapes of it, and I didn't notice at first this big, massive black cloud coming over, and I thought that frames the shapes really nicely. So you've got a dark foreground and a dark top ground, and it was just, encompassing the middle ground in such a way. And I also liked the fact that there was only one family on the beach at the time. So it kind of like shows a juxtaposition to what I'm actually saying. I'm saying there's lots of people go onto the beach and doing the damage and all the rest of it. But in fact, there's just a few people. And it kind of like, sometimes I like to throw that juxtaposition into the image, like saying a place is very, very busy and there's nobody there when I take the picture. So it kind of like makes you think about, well, is it busy or not? So then I was walking around and I noticed the England flag and then the washing machine, and it kind of like reflects on what some people think about other people in terms of like council estates and all the rest of it. And this was far from beyond a council estate. It's quite a few houses, which was quite nice. But I just happened to like the washing machine, which was dumped outside the house there. But the funny thing was that this lady came out. She spotted me taking the picture and very politely said, "Can I ask what you're doing?" And I explained what my project was about. And I just like the fact that there's this washing machine, which is, in its own way a pollutant, and that you're polluting the environment. And then she was like, "Oh, well, the council is coming along to pick it up. I've asked the council to come and trying to persuade me from the story that I was on. I'm not trying to tell no lies, but it's just representation of the damage, people putting rubbish out onto the streets. Now we've got this big wheel here, and when I first saw the big wheel, I really was like, I like the shape of it. I like the domes. I like the fact that it's pretending to be hot air balloons all together and stuff like that. But when I started first working on this project, and let's say this project is going off in many directions, and I need to put it back into a more concise kind of direction. But I started reading a lot when I started thinking about this project, and I didn't realise the harm that these big wheels and merry-go-round slides and swings and all the rest of it, the damage that they actually do to the bird environment, the number of bird strikes that you get with this type of machinery. So there we are, humans of the world, like always, enjoying ourselves on something and damaging the environment, whether it be sort of like through plastic waste or killing of wildlife and stuff like that, whether it be accidental or not. But I like the fact here that you've got some seagulls and stuff sitting on top of the big wheels, so like almost saying like you can't get me kind of thing. So this is a view from sort of like near to the North Sea Observatory of the windmills, and the windmill farms, collecting wind power, cheaper form of power and stuff like that. And I particularly like these windmills. When I see them in the landscape and stuff like that, I'm always drawn to them. I think they're fascinating things. But again, was saying like renewable energy is good for the environment, and it is better than burning fossil fuels and gas and so on, all the rest of it. It is, at the end of the day, better than doing that. But again, there is still impact on the environment when you've got these massive wind turbines. There's no signs for the seagull to tell them to turn right before you get to this point. There's a lot of bird strikes with these things, and so it's damaging on that populace of the bird life and stuff like that. So everything whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, has some kind of impact to the environment, and we need to start learning and educating people a lot more with this. And this is where I think photography has a big part to play. And I like that. I waited for the lonesome seagull to land on this post. I can never remember what they're called. They've got a funny name, but it landed on this post, and I thought that one single seagull is what I need in the picture. So that moves us on to the exercise that we're going to be doing today. So as this is a re-recording after we've done the exercise, I don't think there's any point to tell you what the actual exercise is. So I will leave it at that point, and hopefully that's been of use to you, and hopefully I will see you in classes to come. So bye bye for now.